Hi everyone, welcome to Tim's Vinyl Confessions. I'm Tim Durling and my wife Sarah is with me again. We've got some of our pets in here with us. If you hear some pet noises, I think you can see Gordon's tail somewhere back there. This is another, we're going to do another top 10 list and another by the year list. People seem to like these and we like doing them too. Last year we did top 10 singles from 1992, so this year we're going to go back 30 years once again and do the top 10 songs from 1993. So, and another, the reason that we're doing singles is because, like 92, there weren't so many albums that I was quite as enamored with, but there were some great singles that came out. So,
and as per usual, it's very different. We have very different taste in music, and yes, so it's going to be diverse on my part.
Going to be fun. Mm-hmm. So let's get started with Sarah's number 10 from 1993.
I hear a chair moving. Number 10, I had Salt-N-Pepa, What a Man. And what can I say about this? So this album was Very Necessary, was the name of the album. And it had Shoop on it.
Wasn't En Vogue also on
What a Man? Yes, and yeah. I loved them, and so I think it was kind of a natural progression, if you will, to love this song too. And I remember the video very well. I was at this point in time, for a long period of time, but I was very much a viewer of those kind of music videos and loved all of it.
So my number 10, a little more traditional. But I think this is something we're going to have in common. This might be the only thing. From the album Fate of Nations, Robert Plant, 1993. I'm going with the first single from the album and the first track on the album, Calling to You. This one is it's kind of heavy. It's kind of it's got some Celtic things going on. He hadn't quite gotten into the whole Americana thing yet. It was still a rock record. This is when he was actually working with Kevin McMichael, who was the guitarist from the band Cutting Crew. Was actually from Halifax, I think, and he sadly passed away very, very young, but for a time he was in Robert Plant's band. Calling to You is a great song, yeah, that's my number 10.
Okay. Yes, I do love Robert Plant. I enjoy. Number 9, I have James Laid, which, strangely enough, I did not know in this time frame. I don't think I ever heard it until the mid-2000s, but it makes sense to me. I'm surprised I didn't know it at the time, actually.
It's very English.
Yes.
I don't know. I don't ever remember seeing it on much music.
We must not have, because I wasn't exposed to it until much later, but I do thoroughly enjoy it. It's a short little song, but...
I wonder if it's a case where it came out in the UK and it wasn't more popular in Canada for another couple of years. That might have been a case. It might have been a year or two behind for over here to hear it. Just a possibility. Sometimes that would happen with these UK acts.
I'm not really sure, and I don't know enough of the history on it. But yeah, no, I just have enjoyed it ever since the first time I heard it. It is very much in my, in the realm of something that I would enjoy. So it makes sense.
Well, in the realm of something I enjoy, of course, number 9 is from this Def Leppard release. I call it a release. It's kind of a odds and sods, a lot of B-sides, retroactive. Came out in late 93. And the song I picked was a hit in the UK, cover of a song by Sweet called Action, which I think suited them very, very well. If you hear the Sweet version, if you're not familiar with it, it's very close. They didn't do much to the arrangement, and like I said, I think it was a bigger hit in the UK at this point, but that's my pick for number
9. Number 8. I'm going to flip something here. I'm going to go with Snow, Informer. So...
You couldn't escape the song.
You could not.
It was everywhere.
And I mean, at that point in time, yeah, I thoroughly enjoyed it. It was everywhere. It's fun. It's rather frivolous. Do I take it seriously? No, and I don't know. Like maybe he took himself seriously at that point in time. I don't think he does now.
Was his name Darren O'Brien? Am I remembering that right?
I'm not
He
sure.
said a regular name, and I always chuckled at the fact that his album was called 12 Inches of Snow. But yeah, I
Sure.
was in my first year of radio college, so this song was everywhere. Nobody knew what it said, what most of the lyrics were, but
No,
there you
and
go.
it doesn't matter.
No,
Yeah, it's fun.
so
I mean, you're still gonna like. I don't know. Did we watch it with your sister and the girls?
yes,
And that
yeah,
was
we had
enjoyable.
fun watching some old '90s videos, yeah, with them, and I think that I think our nieces were quite amused by because their
The
mother,
Running
my
Man and-
sister, still knows all the words to all of these songs. She can just at the drop of a hat. So there you go. Number 8. You may notice that I've got a little bit more of the traditional rock bands that I would have been into. Like this was the real rise of alt rock and grunge, but a few bands were still managing to have some minor chart hits, and I've actually got a remnant of the time, which is a CD single. This is Poison and the song Stand. Now this is from their album Native Tongue, which by the look of it they had toned down the image quite a bit. It's not bright neon green. And this is the one where Richie Kotzen's on guitar, not CeCe DeVille. Richie Kotzen actually brought the song "Stand" in, and I think Brett just added a few lyrics to it. Now this song did fairly well considering the times. It peaked.
I don't remember it.
It peaked at number 50 on Billboard, and it went all the way to 15 in Canada. So there was still, and the album went gold. So there was still a little bit of an appetite left for this type of music, and it came in the wake of, I think the idea was this came in the wake of like the Rodney King trial and different things like that. So they had a gospel choir on this song. Very different song for Poison. Yeah. You may find that you knew it, you just didn't know who it was.
No, I don't know that I do. And I
So-
don't recall him looking like that either. So whether that's an enhanced image, not sure.
Oh yeah, Brett was hitting the gym at that time, if that's what you're getting at.
It is what I'm getting at. Yeah.
So, okay, so your number 7.
7. Lenny Kravitz. Speaking of looking like that. Are You Gonna Go My Way?
This was another huge song in college. Like this was a really, really big song. And it was one of those songs that most people, like everybody seemed to like. I liked
It's a
it.
fantastic
It
song.
was a-
It is a throwback.
It was a total
It's a
throwback,
banger.
but it's a rock. It rocks. It's got great guitar in it, and yeah, it's it was a number 1 rock hit for I don't know how many weeks. Like it was pretty hard to avoid, but that's
It's like
okay.
the
It didn't seem to-
song that you could really like if I were a good dancer, it's something that you could really strut your stuff
Well,
to.
of course, I've
feel like.
never thought of that. I love the.
Well, no, you wouldn't.
I
I'm
love the
just
guitar.
saying.
I love the riff in it. It's great. It's got great guitar playing, which, songs with great guitar solos were a rarity in a lot of the '90s. So this had that. Lenny was old school, and yeah, this song just seemed to cut right through and cross boundaries. It was big on the rock charts, big on the pop charts, and this was a big. He had quite a few singles off of this album.
He did.
Which was also called "Are You Gonna Go My Way."
He had I had to believe noted as well was another single from that time frame.
Yeah. So my number 7 is a band that, one of my favorites. This just happens to be what they put out that year. From Counterparts, Rush, and the song is called "Stick It Out," which is this song in particular was one of the heaviest, most guitar-driven songs that they had done in a long, long time. This was a number 1 Billboard mainstream rock hit for I think 3 weeks. The album debuted at number 2, which was their highest debut yet. Which is weird. It never went platinum. It stalled at gold. I think Pearl Jam Versus beat it out of the number 1 spot. But Counterparts has long been referred to as their grunge album, and I don't buy that. But it is drier and it's less keyboardy, and the drums are much heavier recorded than the stuff that they were doing with Rupert Hines. So this is the first time they worked with Kevin Shirley. And then Peter Collins produced this. Great sounding album, and Stick It Out was, the first track, and it kind of announced them being back after quite a long absence.
Number number 6, I had Ace of Base, The Sign, because that was everywhere at that point in time. And I believed I owned the CD. I still believe that I did. I just don't know where it is. Tim tried to find it. So the album was Happy Nation. Also another single was All That She Wants. Like, they had multiple singles from this time
I
frame.
thought the album was called The Sign too, but
I don't know.
Oh.
You're making me question it. And when I wrote it down, I pulled it from
Okay.
somewhere. I don't know.
But yeah, it was
It's fun.
All That She Wants, I think, was the first thing that came out, and then The Sign came out. And they were they were a throwback in a different way because it was total ABBA, right? Two
Yeah,
guys,
I
two
think
girls. They're from Sweden.
It was kind of publicized as like the return of like an ABBA-esque. And I mean, it was very pop, dancey. It was a lot of fun
But
for that
very
time frame.
Euro. Like, it was extremely Euro. So
Definitely.
you couldn't mistake it for...
I knew all the words to all of it. We used to sing it in the car. I mean, this is the time frame. How old was I? 16. So I would have just gotten my license. These are some of the songs that we would drive around and sing to. That's what it makes me think of, anyway.
So my number 6 is sadly an album that didn't do well, at least in North America. I'm not sure around the world. Matt could inform us about that. This is his favorite band, In Excess, and it's actually my favorite album by them. Full Moon, Dirty Hearts. This album, I love the story behind the recording of this album. They basically went to, I can never remember what country they went to, and they basically holed up and recorded the album. It's very rootsy, it's very stripped down. Again, that might have been a little bit of that grunge influence, but when In Excess does that, it's not particularly grungy, it just kind of rocks harder. And nowhere is that better indicated than the song I'm going to pick, which is The Gift, which is a really, really cool rock song. And the video, for its time, had some fairly cutting-edge technology with images intercut with the band members. Like, it's all the band members constantly walking towards the screen, and then there's explosions. It's a really, really great song. Sadly, this album was in the delete bins within the year, but yeah, this is my favorite In Excess album, and The Gift was one of the songs. Time is another good song off of here. And then they had a little bit of airplay with the song Please, You Got That Need, which was a duet with Ray Charles, actually. So there you go, The Gift, my number 6.
So my number 5 is Sheryl Crow, and it is from the Tuesday Night Music Club an album. And I don't know how I missed this. Tim just mentioned this before we started filming, and thank you, husband, for that one. I loved this album. Loved pretty much all the songs on it. It was a great one. So the song I've chosen is Run Baby Run. But I mean, there were a lot of singles
Oh
on
my
here.
goodness,
So
yeah, I'm just looking down for the song titles.
Leaving Las Vegas, Strong Enough, Can't Cry Anymore, and obviously All I Want to Do. But another one, I mean, I love I Shall Believe. There's a lot to enjoy on this one. I mean, I think she became, I don't know what we want to call it, later on in the 2000s.
Fairly mainstream.
Is that what
right?
it is? And so I didn't enjoy it as much.
Yeah,
But
fairly mainstream. This one, like, she paid her dues at this point. She was a background singer for Michael Jackson and a bunch of different people. Actually, the first place, believe it or not, the first place I saw her name was on one of Neil Sean's solo albums as a background vocalist.
That's
So
interesting.
she was behind the scenes.
Okay.
And we actually, if you recall, we read an article about this and her collaborator. It's a very sad
Terribly.
story, but let's not get into that. This was a big album. It spun off singles like 2 years for 2 years. It took I think it took about a year to take off.
Perhaps.
So-
but I mean, the album itself did come out that year,
Yeah.
though. We did.
Because I know All I Want to Do
Confirmed.
was all over the radio, like 94 into 95. It was just every hour on the air. Like, it was
So you may be sick
everywhere.
of that one, I guess is the thing. But there are some other great songs on here, and all in all, I would say it's a pretty great album. And I don't normally say that, so
So,
there you have it.
my next one is, let's see, how many songs did I have on here? Well, isn't that something? I've got 11 songs on here. I gotta leave something off, or I gotta leave something as a, okay. All right.
Honorable.
Yeah. All right, so, all right, that'll be an honorable. My number 5. I've been listening to this band a lot lately. They just put out another album. It's so good. And talk about a band that was in the wrong place at the wrong time, Winger. They put out their album Pull in May of '93. Couldn't have been a worse time. They were vilified. They were made fun of on Beavis and Butthead. It killed their career. This album, they went from having 2 straight platinum albums with their first one and In the Heart of the Young to an album which didn't even certify, peaked at number 85, and that was over for their major label days. First single, though, did okay. Down Incognito. Got the number 15 on the mainstream rock charts. Wasn't glammy. It wasn't hair metal. None of their stuff really was hair metal at all. But I think it held its own. It didn't sound completely out of place. And I do remember seeing the video a couple of times on Much Music. So I guess the backlash hadn't quite begun. But it's a great song, and this album Pull is fantastic from start to finish.
So obviously I was not familiar with that either. Stella. We are about to go Canadian here. So this is Sarah McLachlan, and the album is Fumbling Towards Ecstasy. And the song I picked from this album is Possession. It did get a fair bit of... This is probably where I first heard it, was Much Music.
Much Music was always supportive of Canadian artists, for sure. And there were a lot of singles from this one.
There absolutely were. And I happen to love this album thorouh.
So what is on? So Good Enough, I know
Good
that
Enough,
one. Ice Cream, that became
Ice
better
Cream.
known in its live
Yep.
incarnation.
Hold On is another one, I believe. But they're all, if you like Sarah McLachlan, this is a terrific
I
album.
believe this was her 3rd album.
I think so.
And I think it was her first to get any sort of recognition
Correct.
in the U.S.
And then after that,
she became really big with Surfacing.
there was Surfacing. I get them confused because there was a Solace and then there's Surfacing and I can't remember. I think Surfacing is the one that did well later. I think you're correct.
Yeah. Okay, so my number 4, it was interesting. There was a soundtrack to a movie I've never seen. The movies generally not be considered very good. Last Action Hero, which was a Arnold Schwarzenegger movie. But the soundtrack was interesting because it was a really interesting combination, let me say interesting a few more times, of the sort of the newer rock bands and more traditional rock bands. You had Alice in Chains on there. You had Cypress Hill, so you had a little bit of hip-hop. You had Megadeth. You actually had 2 Alice in Chains songs, but yet Tesla did the title song from the movie. AC/DC had Big Gun. This is where Def Leppard's 2 Steps Behind originated from, which is weird because I don't think it has anything to do with the movie, but that became a kind of an unexpected hit for them. But another song that I really liked from the album was a song by Queensryche called Real World. This is their best of, called Sign of the Times. And Real World was the first single they'd come out with since the Empire album, so it had been a couple of years since they'd had some new music out. It's very much a Michael Kamen orchestral song. I think probably the record label said, yeah, give us something else like Silent Lucidity. It didn't really do that by any stretch of the imagination, but a good song, and from a soundtrack that actually did quite well, better than the movie the movie that spawned it. So that's my number 4.
So my number 3, this is a fantastic album, and I don't, for the life of me, understand why I did not and don't own this one, but Janet Jackson, and the album would have been Janet, period, and the song is That's the Way Love Goes, which I adore. It's a fantastic song. It's got a good groove to it. The whole album is fantastic.
It had 5 or 6 hit singles.
I think
If
so.
was on there.
And which
what was the ballad?
I have You Want This. I love that too. Again, Anytime, Any Place. So this came out in May of '93, and I don't recall what the first single was.
It was That's the Way Love Goes. Because again, I was in college, so I was very aware.
Jennifer Lopez is one of the dancers in the video.
Oh yeah.
It's fantastic.
This was her. She
was more of a grown-up kind of.
It was her first album in 4 years because Rhythm Nation had come out in '89. She'd signed to Virgin Records. She wasn't on A&M anymore, and This is really when she became. I mean, the album's just called Janet. This is really when she became. She was already a superstar, but she just went up another level. The famous Rolling Stone cover was that year. She became almost, for a time, I don't think she sold quite as many albums, but she was as much a household name as Big Brother Michael.
Oh, for sure. For sure. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
So.
Agreed.
Next up, some more CanCon. This was a fun comeback, and this is actually the point where I got into this band, even though they've been around for decades. April Wine, seemingly out of nowhere, they put this album out called Attitude in '93. It was their first album in 8 years. It was a revamped lineup, although most of the guys, 4 of the 5 guys, were alumni, so it was a solid, legitimate lineup. A fairly rocking album, and for an independently released album, it had like EMI distribution. It actually went gold in Canada, and the song that I picked is called That's Love. And that song actually went to number 33 in the US Billboard Rock Chart, which is pretty impressive for a Canadian independent release to get that much airplay, to have that many stations in the US playing it, to actually chart in the rock chart of the top 40. And it's fun, you know. It's a 13 song album. It's a little long, you know. It was the CD age, but I don't really think there's much for clunkers on it. It's really well produced. Miles Goodwin produced it himself. Really heavy drum sound on it. Kind of out of time, but yet in Canada there was such a love and nostalgia for this band, who were back on the road after a long absence, that, like I said, they got a gold record out of this. That little comeback didn't last, but we still got the music. So that is my number 3.
So my number 2 is the Cranberries, and it's from the album Everybody Else Is Doing It, so why aren't we? And the song is Linger. Now, I mean, I could have picked Dreams. Everybody knows that one. I love it too. Actually, I love the entirety of this album, so I don't recall which song I would have heard first.
I think Linger was the first thing to come out, and it, like the Sheryl Crow, it was like a year before it came out, because I remember when the next album,
the next one had
No Need to Argue,
yeah,
the next one had Zombie.
And I
when
loved
it came
that
out
one
in
too.
'94, and I was thinking already, but that had been out for a couple of years, so.
If you like the Cranberries, and you like Dreams and Linger, I loved every song on this
What
album.
else? I don't know any other songs on this.
I don't know that you would, as far as singles go.
No.
But, I mean, I was obsessed with this album at this point in time. This was well listened
Well
to.
played.
Well played at my house, for sure. You can tell, I mean, it's pretty scratched and beat up.
So my number 2, I'm sticking with home country of Canada, and an album that there's actually a new 30th anniversary release of it out now. Under Overlook Band, I think that they kind of started too late. Harum Scarum and their second album, Mood Swings. First single from it was called No Justice. Didn't chart very high, and again, completely out of time with what rock music was going on. Because Harum Scarum always kind of had a hybrid of, I'm going to say Def Leppard, Hagar era Van Halen, right up my alley. Harry Hess, great lead vocalist. Darren Smith, great second lead vocalist on drums. This is a great album, probably their best from start to finish. And there were a few songs that were released as singles, but like I said, it wasn't the time for this type of music anymore. And I've got to get that 30th anniversary album. So anyway, that's my number 2.
I just want to quickly go through like some honorable mentions, since this is kind of the opportunity to do that. So these are just some highlights of albums that came out that year, because that's how I kind of went through and noted. Duran Duran had the album that came out. Duran Duran had Ordinary World and Come Undone on it.
Huge comeback.
Huge comeback.
Yeah.
Those were some fantastic songs. I'm not familiar with some of the other songs from it.
The only other one I know is a song called Too Much Information, which was a single.
Radiohead Pablo Honey. So Creep came off of that album also from '93. We like to joke about that Boy Crazy, That's What Love Can Do, because it's a stock Aikman.
Stock Aikman Waterman joint.
Yes, and it very much sounds like
Yeah.
Bananarama if they had a '93 single. CanCon, Jan Arden had an album that came out that year, Time for Mercy, which had I Would Die For You on it, and I believe Much Music played quite a bit of that.
Quite a bit of that, yeah.
Smashing Pumpkins, Siamese Dream, which had Today and Disarm on it. I love both those songs. They're great songs. Depeche Mode had an album, Songs of Faith and Devotion, that came out that spring. Had I Feel You, Walking in My Shoes. Is that on your list? Okay, we'll skip that one.
You can talk about the song when I.
Okay.
Yeah.
Shania Twain's self-titled album came out that year. New Order had an album, Republic. The song Regret came from that. Tears for Fears had an album called Elemental, sorry. Break It Down Again came from
This
that.
was the one. It was no Kurt Smith. It was just Roland Orzabal.
Correct.
But
I like the song.
They scored a hit with that, and it sounds like, and as long as one of them sings, it sounds like Tears for Fears.
It does, absolutely.
I think they
agree.
did 3 albums before he came back. Yeah.
They had a time frame where they were.
Yeah.
I don't think that they were speaking.
No.
Collective Soul.
Their first album.
Is that Hints, Allegations,
It's
and
hints,
Things?
allegations, and things left unsaid. It's a
Thank
yeah.
you. So Shine came from that.
And that the incredible thing about that album is that it was essentially a demo tape.
I did not know that.
That got started at Shine, started to get radio airplay. Collective Soul is an interesting band because they weren't grungy.
No.
They were more traditional sounding, and like Ed Roland, the singer, he'd been kicking around for years. Like he was probably into his like mid-30s when this came out. So
Oh, I didn't know that.
but
That's
Shine
interesting.
was just an irresistible song that most people liked, right? You know.
Yeah. I know I did, even at the time. U2's Europa, I know that wasn't... how can one explain?
That was
It was more of not experimental. That's
Well,
what
I was
I'm
gonna say,
looking
was
for.
it more
Concept?
of an EP than an album? It was very experimental. I remember that the first thing
Yeah.
that came out was Numb,
Which I enjoy.
and that was
it's
like
weird, but I
was
enjoy
like,
it.
what is going on?
I know,
And
'cause
Ed
it's
starts
Edge.
singing, and then it's a strange. It's
And then
almost
you get Bono
industrial,
doing,
right?
It is kind of, and I do.
Bono doing the falsettos
yes.
and the yeah.
But Stay is from that album.
What else was from
apparently.
the Lemon?
Yeah, I kind of
That's
like that too.
and
It was very quirky.
Is it Stay?
Yeah, it's Stay.
Yeah.
That's what I just said.
It was an interesting period for them, but they had just come off of Achtung Baby, so I think they were still in that experimental mode.
I think so, and the fact that it came on the heels of Achtung Baby, and that was so well received, maybe it.
That was kind of their second win.
Yeah, I think so. Tony Braxton, and I didn't put the title. Maybe it was self-titled.
I think it was I think it was
So
her
that's
first
why.
album.
So Breathe Again, another sad love song. Those were great songs from that. Garth Brooks had an album. In Pieces came out that year. Oh, I made a note here that Dr. Dre's The Chronic came out in December of '92. So Nothing But a G Thing was a single, I think, that year. Tim's laughing at me. Mariah Carey Music Box. So Dream Lover came off of that. Tim's favorite, Nirvana, In Utero that year. Heart-Shaped Box, which is great. Mazzy Star, so I happen to love the song Fade Into You. Came out. There's a Take That album. That's so you, Tim. Everything changes.
See,
Yeah.
this is why it was hard for me to pick 10 albums.
I know, that's
That
why I
were-
wanted to
yeah.
go through this, because these are things that you would never talk about. But, so, and
Another
Crash Test
Canadian.
Dummies, so this is Canadian, so this is,
God
God shuffled his feet. And so what I had noted, so we have Afternoons and, yeah, correct, and Afternoons and Coffee Spoons, I think were the singles from that. Fun, quirky. Do you
Is
remember
there
anything
another,
else?
well, the title, actually the first 3 songs.
Oh, yeah, God Shuffled His Feet.
Swimming in Your Ocean was a single. But I remember,
Much music love to
I
come.
can still remember when the BMG sampler CD came into the community college, into the radio studio, the library, the radio library. And when I first saw the song title, it was just M's. I'm like,
What is this?
and I'm like, so I put it on, and then it was like, oh, okay.
Yeah.
That was the chorus.
Okay, so I'll make this quick. So there's Bryan Adams, So Far So Good, which had the single Please Forgive Me, which I've always really enjoyed, and it's very much, I think you said it was
It was definitely
probably
written
from the-
for waking up the neighbors, but there were too many
It
ballads
sounds
on
that
it.
way.
But
It's
it
a
did the
great
trick.
ballad.
It like, it must have been cool to have a song in your back pocket you can just throw out on a greatest hits album and like, 'cause sometimes people put out these hits albums and the new song isn't a hit. This one was.
And it's terrific. Celine Dion, The Color of My Love came out. I know you.
She like
But-
this was when I think she went from. She took
did.
another leap in popularity at this
Yes.
point.
So she would have been one of my first concerts ever. We went to see her like on the UMB campus at the Aiken Center.
Wow. And she wasn't playing places that size much longer.
No.
And it's funny,
Definitely not.
The Power of Love, I mean, that had been done at least a couple of times.
Definitely.
Because
She
Jennifer Rush wrote it. I think it did it first. Air Supply did it.
I don't know if I knew that.
And Laura Branigan
Yes,
did
that's
it.
how I knew it.
But she did it and made it her own.
She's phenomenal. ultimately. I mean, love her, hate her, she's a fantastic singer. To Love You More was another one that I had noted from that. And then lastly, and I know that this isn't a band that you're familiar with, but Better Than Ezra, apparently the album Deluxe came out
Well, I know that song.
November of that year, and then it was re-released in 95. So I don't think that I
Yeah, see, I would have said that would have been 95, 96, because I'd never heard of it then.
because it was re-released.
Yeah.
But the two songs that I really enjoy to this day, So Good and Rosalia, were from that album. So that was my little highlight of the... Did you want to talk about honorable mention, though, since I just took up all that
Yeah,
time?
but you have another one there. Weren't you going to
That's not an honorable mention.
Oh, it's not? Okay.
No, that's my number one.
Oh, yes, sorry. Yeah, I've got one honorable mention, and she was going to talk about, yeah, okay. So as far as, well, that's not the right cover. Got the sleeve in there. Hold on. At the time, it was odd to have a new album on vinyl. I remember sending away for this from Germany, from Aerosmith's Get a Grip album. It had been 4 years since they'd put out Pump, and again, traditional rock bands were getting hammered in this new era. But, I mean, Aerosmith had the pedigree. They'd been around for 20 years.
I think they did all right.
Yeah, they did okay. First single was Living on the Edge, and I remember within about a week, I was sick of it because it got played all the time, and the video got played all the time. It's a good song. I just heard it a little bit too much. And then they had, you know, the trilogy of the ballad videos. So they had Crying and Amazing and Crazy.
All starring
Alicia Silverstone, and then
Liv was in one of
yeah,
them.
Liv Tyler. This is when she started to use the name and became fairly well known. You know, eventually she would become Arwen. But
It helped that she was she is beautiful, I should say.
so the song I picked was the second single, which is just about Deep Six, the album, because it's actually a heavier rocking song, Eat the Rich. Did well in mainstream rock charts. There was no way it was going to get pop radio play, but I still like that song quite a bit. But yeah, they held their own in the grunge era. They were just kind of beyond all that, and I missed out on getting to see them on that tour because they the newly opened Harbor Station in St. John. It hadn't been there that long. They were one of the first big bands to play there, but tickets were hopelessly sold out. So
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
That's too bad. That would have been a good show, I'm sure. We ready for number one?
sure.
I'm sure Tim's not surprised. So this is Sting, and this is Ten Summoners Tales. And this is probably, well, I don't think I own many CDs from him.
You get that one and the best
Christmas
of.
one.
And the Christmas one, yeah.
So my number one is If Ever I Lose My Faith. What can I say about it? It's, as in all things when I talk about Sting, like he's an artist that I have loved more and more over the years. Would I have loved it at this time in my life? No. I know we've said it before, but it has to be number one because of how I feel about it now.
And now we've had the
think
privilege
ultimately-
of
Now we've seen him live,
seen
which
him
was
in concert.
pretty incredible, ultimately.
What else was on that? That had
So it had Fields of Gold, which
right.
it's fantastic. 7 Days is on here. It's Probably Me. Shape of My Heart had been a favorite of mine for a long time, so that probably would have been my... So Fields of Gold, Shape of My Heart.
And Ten Summoners Tales, of course.
Ever I
That's a
Lose
play
My
on
Faith.
his actual surname.
Gordon
So,
Sumner.
Yeah,
Or Gordon is in here somewhere.
yeah. Instead of Gordon Sumner, we got Gordon Somewhere.
Yeah, typically.
So my number one is a song that people loved to make fun of when it came out. I loved it from the first time I heard it. I still like it now. I think it's really, really fun, which is fun. It might be a funny word for it, but it is Pride and Joy from the Coverdale Page album. Out of nowhere, this showed up in 93. And so it's David Coverdale from Whitesnake and, of course, Jimmy Page collaborating on what essentially is a Whitesnake album with Jimmy Page on guitar. That's, with David Coverdale doing the bulk of the lyric writing and the vocals. It sounds like a modern, a 93 Whitesnake album would have sounded like, but it's got Page on guitar, some great riffs. And the song is Pride and Joy. It was a mainstream rock song number one mainstream rock hit for 6 weeks in a row And the album stalled at gold, which is kind of says a lot about how this mainstream rock kind of dropped in popularity. But I think what also didn't do this album any favors is that they only did a few tour dates in Japan. They never brought the tour to North America or anywhere else. And there's been there's been a lot of talk about a 30th anniversary or some sort of anniversary edition with some unreleased songs. Coverdale doesn't seem to think that's going to happen now. The Masters were lost in that Universal fire, which is a shame. I thought that they made pretty good music together, but it's also been said that, I started my top 10 off with Robert Plant, of course. Robert Plant had a field day making fun of this. He's always called him David Cover Version. And a year later, just over a year later, we had the Page Plant No Quarter album, which was totally stripped back, and then the Eastern arrangements and stuff. And it's been speculated that Jimmy Page did this to kind of spur Robert Plant on to do something with him. Said, if you don't, I'm going to do another one of these. So I don't know. Really like this album. I'd love to have it on vinyl. But yeah, Pride and Joy, probably my favorite single to come out in 1993. So, So there you go. It was a very a year full of change in music. The musical landscape, even by the end of the year, was different than how it began. Because even though the likes of Nirvana and Pearl Jam, their big albums came out in '91, it took a while. It took a while for them to become really, really mainstream. And the bands that I loved, a lot of them just fell by the wayside. And if they didn't, kind of fade out of the scene altogether for a few years, they were down to the indie labels. And it became harder for me to find the stuff that I wanted to listen to. But these many years later, we can look back and say, yeah, there was some good music that came out that year. So
there absolutely was.
Yeah.
I mean, we were starting to see more and more hip hop and R&B and things on the charts.
And with the advent of Garth Brooks, you had country artists that were now crossing over to the pop charts in a way that hadn't happened since the 70s, and that became another defining. A lot of people say that when hair metal had its crash, its fall, which all musical movements do. Nothing's popular forever without going through peaks and valleys. That everybody went to grunge. That's not really the case. At least in my experience, that really wasn't the case in my neck of the woods, like where we live. Yes, there were people that liked the alt rock stuff, but a lot of people went to hip hop and a lot of people went to the new country. That's because I remember finding
country was huge at this point in time.
I remember finding it strange that people my age that were 19, 20 years old were buying country albums, and I always thought that's for your parents. The country music's for your parents to listen to. Anyway, things were changing.
Garth Brooks, guys.
Yeah, things were changing. So
and then Shania. So yeah, definitely changing.
So all right, so that's our top songs from 1993. What are yours? We'd love to see the responses. We get a lot of response last time from the 92. We'll continue to do this series, and we will see you all again. Thanks for watching Tim's Vinyl Confessions.